Hi, Curt Doolittle.
Good morning, Dr. Brad.
It's a great pleasure to share your company again.
We had a wonderful chat yesterday. Hope people see it.
I hope so. Freshly cleaned coffee cup.
Really?
Yes, sir.
No
holds barred.
I heard there's a rumor that the condition of your coffee cup reflects the condition of your soul.
That's terrible. Oh my. That's
I doubt there's any merit to it.
I'm certain that you're correct.
We had 100 and how many users, how many people have we seen since yesterday? We got a couple of hundred views on that since almost a couple hundred since yesterday.
That's good.
That was a pretty useful discussion we had. Anyway.
So this one today, I'm like, see, it's after we have that conversation, it unloads my brain so much that I'm like, I have been struggling to find something to discuss. But I found something to discuss.
Okay. Well, last week before the meeting, you were talking about all this trouble you were going to give me. And
I don't know.
I didn't see any trouble coming.
Okay.
You
still don't see it. It's good. It's best served cold. This time is interesting because I'm just reading my news feeds, and BitChute has what we call the funny pages. We call it the funny pages because it's just all the far out stuff. So I was watching BitChute today, and I'm like, what the idea came up to me. I'm considering artificial intelligence in the social media and mapping out influencers like we would map out, and they have mapped out the white matter in the brain.
Say that again.
The AI mapping social influencers in the social media in analogously to the way they map the white matter in the brain for connection between processors.
Okay, I can go with that.
And it's like the issue is I started doing some research on, is there services that do this? Because it's not just groups connecting to other groups or individuals connecting to various groups, but also use of terminology that is influential to certain groups. And it's like, okay, then I started doing research on software that was available, and I'm like, okay, there's people that have software that's available for social mapping. And I'm like, okay, I don't even know what that means, because I'm like, it's like, okay, I just discovered the pond. I need to understand that a little bit, and I thought you might have some.
Well, one of the things I was wondering is why that isn't being published like it used to be. So it used to be pretty frequent. Like you could, I remember back in the mid-teens, there was a pretty good map of the public intellectuals and how they spread into factions, and it was done by social media analysis. and I was like, shit, this is accurate. It's pretty good. I'm correctly classified next to Hoppa. All right, I mean, okay. So that was there, and what's bothered me is we're not seeing that anymore, and I wonder if there's a reason for it, that the APIs are closed, or that it's now in the realm of the academy and they overscience it instead of illustrate it. But I haven't seen those kind of graphs. I mean, it was a really common thing to see. Here's a network graph. My favorite was, here's a network graph of the transitive dollar bills. Right. Here's one of telephone calls and cell phone calls. Here's one of airline travel. But that's physical stuff you can measure, right? I mean, and publish. But we got to the social media sphere, and you could start to see, well, here, these people from these regions use these terms and they talk to each other more. And I just haven't seen that kind of, we call it map porn. I haven't seen that kind of map porn come out of late. And I'm kind of surprised by it. So it could be that it's happening. I'm out of the filter, or it could be that the original transparency that was possible in these websites doesn't exist anymore, and so you can't produce it. Or it could be that they're doing it, but they keep it in house and they protect it because they don't want anybody to
proprietary information.
To treat it proprietarily. So so I just liked that we used to have this ability to produce layers that would show both locally, nationally, continentally in the United States and internationally, who talked to whom about what. It's kind of, and so I know the information exists. I just don't know why we don't see it anymore. And I haven't, it's not one of those things I've thought about. And I mean, I've thought about it, but I've not thought about it enough to go, I'm going to go spend 6 hours figuring this out. Right. I'm just not, it's not been that interesting to me. But it is a kind of depressing thing because that paints a clear picture. What I think you're referring to is that Twitter released their algorithm yesterday. Turns out to be pretty simple, really. But what it also turns out to be is that it's creating an optimum venue for market segmentation for advertisers. In other words, that's what it appears to be organized to do, the data weighting. And so it's looking for positive responses, right? Something that's positive, that's within your network, that doesn't take people out of the network, right? And it's looking for clusters of influencers in that network. You get elevated if you're one of those.
Right.
And it punishes you for going outside the network. And
that was an interesting development, I thought.
Right, which I think is kind of, well, if you're trying to create communities of common interest where people share positives, it makes sense. I'd just like to be able to select that. On the other hand, the punishment for being blocked, which I am, is is fairly high. I block people all the time. I thought that it mattered that I block people. It doesn't. It matters that they block me.
You triggered the response of some neuron group in my head that has to make a statement here.
Okay, fine.
It's just like this. It's like this. Curt was blocked.
Oh, yeah.
Oh my God. It's like this. Of all the people that earned it, I'm confident you have earned it.
Well, no, I mean, I'm not a troll, right?
No, you're worse. You're a systematic vader.
You ruined my day.
You're a marauder. I'm just here to gather information, and this is going to hurt me more than it hurts you. Sorry, I'm done now. I'm going to have a little bit of coffee.
So if you look at it as what do I do, right? I hear there's something going on in the world. I'm like, what is the opposition's thinking behind this?
Okay.
In other words, what kind of stupid nonsense would lead you to that stupid nonsensical conclusion, right? And I don't understand. So what do? Is I get involved in the conversation. I do my King of the Hill game and whatever, and I eventually learn that they block me.
That's because they don't want you to. You already got what you need, man. You're good.
I know, but I paid a price for it.
That's right. That's right. You did pay a price, and it's like now you know the nature of the price.
Yes. And the whole thing is that you really want to do is make sure everybody knows to like when somebody says something meaningful, not just trivial stuff. But you just got to make sure you like, because sharing is good, but liking is better than, which is not intuitive.
That is kind of counterintuitive. That's how I viewed it.
So the networks, what else? The fact that they don't want anything on the Ukraine war is filtered out. That's because somebody's added that rule. If it's about the Ukraine war, they want that deboosted.
I figured that was a taboo subject all the way around.
The rest of it is pretty normal, but if you think about it, if you say, well, why would you select this group of weights? Well, it's because you want market segmentation for advertisers. And
Creating it's just marketing.
yeah, it's just marketing, right? I mean, that's all it is. So there's whenever we run into these questions about the problem of social media, which basically means it's free because it's paid for by advertisers, we run into the same problem of the conflict of interest between the two. I started saying to myself, well, what would I want to be different? My view is that there are basically there traditionally are three kinds of censorship.
Okay.
The first is, and I add a fourth, which is it a violation of decorum? Is it slur? I mean, I hate that shit. Swearing, slurs, you know. It just, what's the matter? You're laughing at me again.
It's because you prefaced the statement. I hate that shit.
Yeah, okay.
Especially the cussing. The irony, it just with a knife I could cut.
Do you know how humiliating it is to work with you every day?
I apologize for that, sir. That's certainly not my intention. It's just hanging with Curt. It's awesome experience.
So, all right, let me try again. So the first one is decorum, right?
Yes.
So what you're trying to do is you're just trying to get away from slurs and, you know, all this other stuff. The second one is content, which is the wrong term for it, but it's like it's being argumentative or what I would consider gossiping, shaming, or rallying, moralizing, right? That's the step up from. No, it's basically undermining.
Oh yeah.
Right, it's undermining.
It's still not substantial.
Right. And then the step up from that is really taboos, right? Is that if it's just avoid taboos, right? So you have decorum. How did we just label the second one?
Content.
Content, but it should have been labeled undermining. The third is taboos. Well, that should leave you with just rational arguments.
Right.
Right. So, which is what we all want, right? We want to filter down the stuff that's evasion of argument and filter in the things
responsible conversation.
Right. That's what we're trying to get to. And
okay.
So the problem is that until now we have GPT-4 and we'll have 5 soon. You'll be able to soon. We'll be, you know, if we can get the cost down like they have with the Stanford model, so that these things can be filtered, because they do filter them today, and I can't quite see that system. In other words, that they didn't expose that to us. They didn't expose the weights to us, right, or what it was actually doing, right? But it does do a lot of keyword stuff, like don't use these words or these words in combination, right? It does a lot of that. There's a huge database of this stuff, right? It's why it's a miracle this stuff is this fast, and it's why you think they do it live, but they actually do it in batches every 1 billion times a day.
Right.
So it couldn't, if it's like, can't be live. There's just no fucking way you can process this stuff at this speed, right? So they just calculate it, and then they basically leave card decks for you to pick from, right? For the algorithm to pick from the card decks. Think of it that way. And so they just add new stuff to the top of the card deck, right? So you're getting newer stuff and it's pretty, I mean, what they're doing is fine, right? I mean, the problem is it's still depending on the users to make the quality assessment, and that's a really bad idea because people are dumb fucks. You know?
I understand. I understand.
So
okay.
So wait a minute. So my view is that the thing we should add is whether it's testifiable or not.
Right.
And so there's no reason we can't produce AIs that filter for each one of these things and then tag them. Now, one of the things they do appear to do is they sort of pigeon you on left and right, just like Facebook does. Facebook profiles you left and right. It's more complex than left and right, but
yes,
they do pigeon you there. So that's good, because I don't want to hear leftist propaganda all day. I mean, and they don't want to hear ours either, right?
Perfect.
Right. I mean,
this is okay. I'm hitting another action threshold here.
Okay, so I just got to finish. I'm almost over the arc, all right? So
okay.
It's a decorum, it's
undermining,
it's
taboos.
Taboos, which is hostile subjects. It's whether it's an argument and whether it's testifiable.
Right.
Oh, and then with that, you could just say whether it biases toward the masculine right or the feminine.
Oh, I like that.
Right. So that's not an impossible thing to train any of these text interpreting AIs in. It's actually pretty easy. So the compute cost has to be lowered. In other words, GPT-4 is 3 and 4 are regulated, right? Because the compute cost of doing this is non-trivial. But if we use GPT 3.4 to train, is it Alpaca? I think it's called Alpaca, which is the Stanford version. Now you've got down to something that it's really low compute power. And so it's possible to put the AI in place to do this. So I think there's a chance that this could get better, but that's what we would want, right? It's okay to say, I effing hate you, you guys are scumbags, whatever. I don't have a problem with them posting it. I have a problem with it showing up in my feed.
Right.
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 And I have a problem with this whole thing of, it's really trying to find like a small group of individuals who are the real intellectuals in your group or the producers in your group. Yeah. And it's trying to build a wall around that group of those high content producers. And so that's what bothers me, is that you may not realize that you're working your way into an echo chamber.
A silo, yeah.
Right, and then that doesn't really help anyone. It is okay if you go outside of the echo. See, that's the thing. We can leave echo chambers if we're having adult arguments, but until we can actually eliminate the previous 4 stages from a discourse, we can't cross domains. So that's what so you need AIs to do this, because it's too complicated otherwise. In other words, you can't do it by set theory, which is what databases do. You have to do it by predictive sequences, which
I just wrote that. It's predictive capacity that matters, and that's what we need to project out, because it's predictive models that are competing here.
Correct.
And we must communicate predictive models at variance between silos in order for the silos to improve.
Correct.
Mutually, in a mutual
so it's really a matter of, it's sort of like, I was thinking about your neural column, right? Yeah. There's a lot of crazy shit that goes on inside a neural column, right? I mean, it's all doing this stuff, but there's a wall between neural columns. It's not physical, it's just a distance wall, and the charges can't cross that, right? A dendrite might work its way across and then make and decide, yeah, well, maybe, but basically the neural column is sort of insulated like a transistor, right? And I'm like, well, that's good, as long as what gets out of the neural column is a fact, right? Or an argument, because that's what your brain does, right? It creates a neural column and says, this looks like the edge of my cup.
Right.
Right. And the next one says, hey, your edge of the cup looks like my rim of the cup. And the one next to that says, that looks like the edge and bottom of this cup. And but together they say, oh shit, it's a cup, which gets escalated up to the macro column level. Right. So it's a cup, which sends that on to your brain and says, hey, there's a cup here. In other words, that amount, that data in that space is a cup.
Yep.
So we want that. That's what we want. We want good information to transmit between
Silos, yeah.
silos, and it's just not happening. So
No, and so this was where I was going. Now it's I think presume that
actually, let me run with one more on it, and then you can run.
All right.
So the majority of neurons are inhibitory neurons, right? Right, and that's what that saying is. You're trying to. There's a lot of shit. You've got to get out of any communication between the rabble. So it's okay for there to be nonsense within the silo, right? I mean, that's fine.
It's going to have its nonsense.
Yeah, it's we're all. What is the Munchkins and the Wizard of Oz? We represent the Lollipop Guild. I mean, I don't know what the Lollipop Guild thinks about, but it's probably not what I want to think about, right? So you want to have that get out,
right? So this is good because it's this. I was working on watching the news feed from the crazy pages, the funny pages I call them, and so the issue is this: is like the standard news cycle is the mainstream media news cycle is producing the chanting that maintains the stasis field that holds the people in that are captured by it.
Okay, say that over again because I forgot I didn't get the first part.
The mainstream media narrative is the chanting that holds the people in stasis that are captured by the mainstream narrative. The purpose of the chanting is to maintain the focus of the faithful from being distracted by facts coming from outside their silo. So it's like this: if we have a captive group of good churchgoers that believe in our cult, if we stop chanting, someone's going to hear the birds outside and be distracted from the message we wish them to be paying attention to.
Right, and so they're reliant on emotional engagement.
Right. But it didn't occur to me as it's a negativa. They're generating a positive that repels competitive influence.
Yeah, but they're going to come back and say, "But you guys didn't believe the science of the vaccine."
What you call the science and what you call the vaccine. Yes, I understand what you're telling me.
The problem is that they don't. I've yet to find a person who makes the argument that has the knowledge to make the argument. Right? I mean, there's just I've yet to find one, and
it's very disheartening.
But it's also the same on the other side, which is there are people saying stuff like viruses don't exist. There's no proof of them.
I got nothing to say to that.
What am I going to do with that kind of stupidity? I mean, I can't.
I refuse to process it. I just say that, okay, that's one of those signals that doesn't make it across. It doesn't generate an action potential.
I have this noblesse oblige thing right deep in my bones, and so I feel like it's a responsibility to help, meaning correct these poor morons.
That's what gets you banned,
and that's what gets me in trouble.
That's the bird. That's what we call a white man's burden, my friend.
It is. God damn. It's just like, you want to help these numbnuts, right? I mean, there's
a limit.
They're screwed, and I feel bad for them. But I mean,
hey, here it goes to what my uncle told me many years ago, the psychiatrist. He says, Brad, how many psychiatrists does it take to change a light bulb? And he tells me the answer. He says the answer is one, but I believe it truly to be none. But the light bulb must truly want to change itself. And it's like this. So the issue is this, is your pearls before swine problem.
Yes.
That's all. So don't cast those there.
Yeah, that's a good way of saying it until you realize the flip side of that argument is those that are uninformed of history are bound to force the rest of us to repeat it.
to watch them do it. I understand you. But that this reminds me of Martin Armstrong, who's having a fight with his AI, right? So Martin Armstrong, his AI sees all this disaster that we're now living through. He sees it like 25 years ago, 30 years ago, and he's writing it down. But this is bad. And he's going up to Capitol Hill, and he's going to go make his computer be wrong, and he can't do it because they can't reorganize their incentive structures. Can't be done. You can't. The AI knows what's going to happen, and it foretold it as a prophecy, and it is in stone.
Well, I mean, the problem is there are a lot of people could make that claim that are high, and Armstrong's not. In other words, I bet I could look at his code, understand it probably in an afternoon, right? Maybe less, okay. Right? I would go through it because I think like an economist, right? So I would go through there and I'm like, okay, I see what you're doing. And he's basically weighing probability cycles because in the end, he's the one who said this. He's the one I got it from. Demographics is destiny.
Yes.
Right. And so he's the one I'm like, fuck, he's right. You know, because we're about the same age, I think, if I remember.
Yeah. Just a wee bit older than me.
So I remember him going through it and I'm like, God damn, that fucker, he's right. You know, it's just, there's nothing we can do. I mean, it's just physics, right? I mean, you have this many hydrogen, this many oxygen, this many carbon, right? This is just gonna.
Right, and there's this, so the waves are crashing all at the same time. And it's like, it's really disturbing to live through it because we're in the crumple zone right now, right? We got a little impact in 2008 and it just keeps on crumpling. And it's like, okay.
So would you rather be us who knows? Would you rather be the people that don't know and feel chaos because of it? I'm not really sure about the answer to that question. Sometimes I just prefer to be, I like to be ignorant, licking a lollipop.
What? Oh my! I understand you, and I'm like, okay, I recognize the dilemma in your mind, but fortunately, there's no choice because you're aware.
Yeah, well, you know,
and so it is the crashing of multiple waves and trying to surf that function, right? Because that's what you're how do I not get crushed? How do I profit and advance the cause to where it needs to end up in the end? That's the only question, right?
Yes.
And so that's where we're left. And it's just a damn difficult thing because it's like, okay, there's nobody living that has any memory of this.
Yes.
Because it's multi-generational waves are crashing. It's like, so and
the last time it happened, it was like the World Wars, right? So it was really, really bad. It clouded everything, you know. We have what you would think of as lost cultural memory from before.
Okay.
Right, because it was so disruptive, and then the post-war counter reaction against our cultural memory has been so destructive. So it's not only is there nobody alive, but we've had an extraordinarily disciplined attack on our institutions of cultural production of responsibility, and so that requires all that ancient knowledge. It's just not there. So, I mean, people used to pick on Kondratiev a bit because of his cycle theory. And I'm like, but it's right, because that's what all economies do. I mean, all systems do at all scales. They identify and exhaust opportunities, right? I mean, and they have to go searching for new ones. And the whole thing is, can you keep enough opportunities going so that there's a reasonable chance that you'll identify a new one? That's why R&D is so important. So, and then we get into the point where we're talking about all these different waves and how it's working out. But somewhere around 2006, 2008, whatever happened in 2008 so broke the community, the intellectual community, that we've seen almost nothing out of it ever since.
And what intellectual community are you referring to?
Those of us who looked, I don't know how to describe it. We call ourselves contrarians, right?
Right.
But what does that really mean? It just means that you look at the world as if there's a flocking behavior happen in a market.
Right.
What is the end of that flocking behavior? Where the tendency of all people is to extrapolate a curve into a line.
Yes.
Right? To predict a line will continue, but they don't. You identify an opportunity, you maximize the opportunity, you exhaust the opportunity. And because of populations, whatever, and the size of opportunities and all distributions, what happens is there's a sort of pattern to this, right? And this has to do with the pattern of life, right? People only have so many years in each phase of life, right?
Right.
There's a normal human forgetting curve. There's a normal human counter reaction to the previous generation. And so if you have the age of the population, right? The overlapping ages of the population, if you have the opportunities that group saw, you have the counter reactions against the past that they saw,
right.
And you basically can figure out where these people are going to go. And we've seen this. I mean, we have people who study this are keenly aware of what's happened. But something happened after 2008 and that whole world just went quiet, and I don't really understand why. Now, I got out of it because I decided, I mean, I tell this story all the time, that a liar like Paul Krugman, his lie, one paragraph of his lies takes me 20 pages to correct. You understand? So
right. So you blocked him.
I don't block him. I just stop counter. I mean,
I understand, but it's essentially you discontinue.
Essentially, you have to give up on.
You're no longer responsive.
And Bob Murphy really is the guy who owns that trophy anyway, right? I mean, he's right, right? I mean, Bob's very Catholic, so I argue with him once in a while, but it's good natured from my end anyway. Anyway, so Bob Murphy's the one that beats on Krug. Okay, well, there's a guy who's out there doing that. And so I was like, okay, well, economics has just collapsed. I mean, and what happened really in 2008, if I don't go too deep in this, is that we proved that the Austrian theory of the cycle is true. When we proved the Austrian theory of the cycle is true, we proved the theory of cycles is true.
Right.
Right. But what's happened is that when everything is going what you think is a good direction, it's easy for a contrarian to see failure points. But once everything starts to fail, a contrarian can no longer see failure points. Does that make sense?
There's too much broken glass around.
It's just nothing but broken glass. You have no idea how the pickup sticks are going to get picked up off the ground. So, we used to get the, broken clocks are right twice away. You're always doom and gloom. No, we're just talking about the end of cycles are going to happen. So you time the end of a cycle. Have we reached peak? Then you get out, right? Take your profits and start looking for the next opportunity. But you don't try to exhaust the last penny in your opportunity, because every penny you make now is at increased risk. Now, money is just the easiest thing to explain, but yes, it applies to all human existence, right? I mean, friendships, relationships, marriages, business incomes, businesses, right? I mean, industries, markets, it doesn't make any difference, right? So the same thing happens. Civilizations exhaust their opportunities, and they do for predictable reasons. So I just don't, it seems like we all just threw up our hands and gave up in 2008. And you can see that because it used to be really, before 2008, economists were on the shows all the time. Their blogs were active. There was data coming out. You know why? Because the data was predictable, which means it's valueless. Does that make sense? Yes. Any economic data that's predictable, right, is valueless, right? So what you want is what's unpredictable, which is what Nassim Taleb is always trying to say. What are the tails that cause more consequence than the entire curve?
Right.
Because that's what happens, right? some fucking thing out here, the very low chance of probability, and or even you're unaware of, the consequences of that thing will be greater than all the work you did to exploit this opportunity,
Yes.
this field of opportunities.
Right.
So in 2008, it just like everything blew up, and like there's like the cycle theory's gone away, and I'm like, well, there's a reason for it, is that that the only cycle that matters at this point is demographics. Does that make sense? Everything else is collapsing. So you have a demographic distribution, and you have an extraordinary amount of chaos, and it's totally unpredictable. And I'm like, well, that doesn't really help us, right? I mean, there is a way to think through this problem. I mean, let's at least try.
I was going to make a T-shirt to this effect.
Yeah, what was your
The
T-shirt?
T-shirt is a chicken, and it says Chicken Little was right. The sky is falling, and be careful. Make sure no pieces hit you because they're heavy. Because everything is broken.
Yes.
There's no predictability here. The best you can hope to do is not get caught up in the crooked gears, and you can't repair the broken thing because it has to fall apart before we can reassemble it.
Right. And it's like a great example is they're actually talking about the Volcker era again right now.
I was just listening to that conversation too.
Well, I mean, it's because we're in the same problem, right? For the same fucking reason. So
yes, indeed.
So, but what's interesting is it isn't a bunch of economists looking at numbers, predicting numbers in a window of whatever. Matter of fact, there's no way to do it.
No, it won't work.
There's nothing you can count on.
No new Volcker moment because that switch won't work.
Well, hold on a second. That's two different things. What I'm saying is, what empirical measure will help you predict the future in this much uncertainty? Well, the only thing you can look at is what is your population? What is your average IQ, which means like how big is your smart fraction? What state of development do you have? How autoctic you are, right? How much energy you have. And therefore, what options are available to you? Right? We're down to, it's like we've taken off the shutters, we've pulled the windows, ripped off the roof, ripped off the siding. We're down to like, well, we've got basically the foundation now, right? And so how do you predict the rest of it from the foundation? Well, I don't know. And there's a tornado coming, and tornadoes of F5 can rip foundations out of the ground. So, I mean, I don't know. I mean, how do you predict anything? Well, you do it, and this is why Zion's being popular, is because when you start the site, when you start the analysis over from scratch, what do you got? People and inputs.
Right.
Right. That's you got. The only modifier is better governments are a big advantage. So, and better government just means property rights. I mean, it's something more than that. So,
better rule of law.
Rule of law, right?
Yeah. Oh my.
So, I mean, it's just like I would tell people, I can't see into the future anymore.
Nobody can.
Right.
There's too much debris in the air from the explosion that's occurring.
Right. So you can't line up 6 factors across different, you can't, I'm just making a number up here.
Yeah.
But normally what you can do is just say, well, this is there, this is there, this is there. The normal incentives people would follow are this, this, and this, and this. These are the current limits of their capacity. Therefore, the general direction will be here. I don't fucking know. Right. Because I could play it that Russia and China win, Iran wins, they bring totalitarianism back to the majority of the world and bring Islamo-communism into. I could make that argument. I can make the easy argument that the population collapse in Europe and America is going to destroy the smart factor, which is going to alleviate our advantages. I could make this factor that if we had a civil war in America, that would just cause incredible chaos on the planet, because everybody who's currently pent up would start reaching for every opportunity. I mean, that's just 3, right? Those are 3 extremes. but we could go through one where it's a slow decline of everybody, very much like the late Roman Republic, and we see slow return to local clusters.
Hmm.
Everybody slowly gets poorer, right? So there's so many ways, and not a lot of them say we're going to be on the Star Trek Enterprise with replicators and space traveling space.
Oh my.
So I mean, that's why prediction is a problem. You need something to predict. And it really matters if you have guys who are 60, 70, 80 years old who've seen 3 or 4 cycles. Like, I mean, I remember
nothing like this.
I remember 68, right? I remember that shit. I mean, I was a kid, but I remember the bombings and all that shit, right? I remember the oil crisis. I remember being so pissed off about it, right? I remember when my gas for my car went from $0.25 to $1 a gallon.
Yes.
And thinking, how is anybody going to get to work? Right. I remember the gas lines and that stuff.
That's when I will go no, give a plug for my business associate's father, he was a factory worker, and he drove far to get to his work. And he's like, they started rationing the gas every other day, right? Evens and odd license plates. And he sits back and he's like, I need gas. Where is there always gas? I'm going to manage a gas station.
Yes.
Very practical. Just, they always have gas there.
He was thinking.
That's a Marine, man. It's like, how do I solve this problem? Because the problem is not I don't have gas. It's just some people don't not have gas.
Yes.
Be one of those people. Anyway, shoot. So it's like the it reminds me of the Greek philosopher Diogenes, right? Wandering around the marketplace with his lantern looking for an honest man, right? And it's like we're in the dark, and it's like it's just dark here, and there's not much going on. And if we can not trip on our own footsteps, we're doing pretty good.
We're in the point where democracy is a liability. That's really the problem. We have not enough rule of law and too much democracy, and we've got too much credentialism and clerisy in there, and it's made possible by.
This is good.
The church was made possible by the peasantry, and yes. the clerisy in the state is made possible by the peasantry. And it's a difference between not exploiting the peasantry and letting the peasantry have a voice in what you're going to do when they lack the competence. Now they lack the knowledge and ability to do so. And so we're in a point where the democracy is very good in ages of windfalls, which we've really had since the late 1700s. We've had a series of huge windfalls. But, you need to be a going concern at some point when you're out of windfalls. And that means you have rule of law, and you need to limit the participation in the decisions the government makes over the allocation of resources to the people who actually understand the allocation of resources. And then there's points in times of war where it doesn't matter what the allocation of resources you may want, or what the windfalls that are there is, right. That we're going to mobilize the whole. So the Romans did it right? They had dictatorship for war. They had going concern, and in times of plenty, they redistributed heavily. And so it's that 3-step government that we don't have, because we're operating as if the universe will be consistent, when in fact you actually do need 3 different governments for 3 different conditions. I mean, if we're sitting here rolling in money, it's hard to not get redistribute it to the people who otherwise need it. But it's another thing to say that when you're not rolling in it, that you're trying to make it, that the wants of the unproductive are of much value to making sure you're productive enough.
So I noted this. I was looking at the manosphere again this morning, in between seeing my patients, And it was like this interesting thought came across my mind, which was that this transition is between an overly feminized civilization, and it is the man was talking to other men, and he's training people how to be like this, is to have a mindset that is masculine, that doesn't denigrate the feminine, but doesn't elevate the feminine falsely.
I think it means contain them. You know, it's like you have to.
It's like it's because they're evil.
I know
It's
that.
not, the bad people have to contain the evil people.
Yes, I mean God, that was fucking brilliant, Brad. I'm gonna write that one down. That was fucking.
That's
brilliant.
what I got an expletive out of it too.
That was fucking brilliant. You know, oh my God.
But because it's this cycle, it's a masculine feminine cycle that's breaking right now too. Social like mental mindset. We're making notes.
I'm just gonna share your little bit of wisdom there, because I'm sure that's gonna be evil.
And so it's like this. I look at the tidings, you know, the surface effects, which is like the Trump indictment. It's a surface effect. It's a symbolic manipulation that's occurring, and it's like it serves its purposes for all. Yes, but it serves its purposes. So it's like it is going to will make heads spin, each their own direction, based upon the charges that are at work in the polarized environment we're in.
Say that again.
So it will make heads spin, each their own direction, based on the polarity of the situation. It's a polarized situation. And it's like, it's doing its job. It's doing a job, and it's having an effect. It's a metaphysical function, and is pushing the group of the aggregate of all the people in a direction.
Mm-hmm.
And it's performing. It will do just fine.
Well, general problem is the rate of adaptation,
okay,
versus the rate of change.
Okay, that's good.
So if you look at Europeans, we're highly adaptive. We can change. If you look at Americans, Hayek used to tease us about this. Is that Americans can wake up tomorrow and decide they want the country to be different, and it will be by Monday.
Right.
Right. So we're hyper adaptive, right? Now the Muslims in collapse, or after the Muslims, despite the competency of the Ottomans, could not adapt to modernity. They couldn't do it, and to some degree, they still can't do it. And so, while I think the internet is accomplishing far more than everything else has, which is, it's like what Greek writing did to the world, the internet is doing to the world, especially to Islam. So the young people aren't quite as busted. At least the educated young people aren't quite as busted. But I mean, the problem with that society is they can't move, right? And so what you end up with is the pain you feel in any correction, right? Which means adaptation.
Yeah.
Any adaptation is dependent on your rate of adaptation. Your rate of adaptation is somewhat dependent upon your institutions, your norms, traditions, values, and institutions. But it's also dependent on your reserves. I mean, it's no good if people are going to starve to death before you adapt, right? So, and what's happened today is that nobody has any. This world economy is efficient, so nobody has reserves, and then some different parts of the world are more adaptive and less. It's probably obvious that roughly reflects IQ. And on top of IQ, it roughly reflects institutions. So, why is China able to adapt faster than India? Well, it's because they have the Red Army, which is they have a united force that will serve the national interest, right? Whereas India doesn't, and it's it's a much slower process.
Right.
Get there. Are they going to get there? Well, mostly though, this current president seems to be throwing them back into religion. Modi seems to be throwing them back into their religious past because fundamentally India is a religious, not.
That's the nature of their organization.
So in China, we have the people, of course, in Japan, what's the difference between Japanese and Germans, right? I mean, it's the truth before face before truth, but I mean, it's the same duty, or they have the same sense of duty. Well, I mean, Chinese people could be in the same position we are if it wasn't for the communist government, or if they could get out from under the communist government. Certainly the South would be. And they have the IQ points for it. They have a history of institutions. They don't have the morals and ethics we do, but generally they will work hard, which is really 80% of it, right? From the population's viewpoint, they're very entrepreneurial and they work hard. And so, I mean, it's not like Southern Italy or Greece, right? So sorry, I had to. Sorry, I lost myself there. So the world has this problem of rates of adaptation, and it's pretty easy for Americans, for Europeans, for Japanese, for Chinese to adapt, but after that, it gets increasingly difficult. I mean, what are you going to do to Central Asia, for Christ's sake, or MENA, or Sub-Saharan Africa? I mean, rate of adaptation is not high.
So it's like this is okay. The issue, so I'm going to circle back a little bit, because it's like you're trying to predict. So we're trying to predict, and we're trying to go, okay, we're in this fog, and it's very difficult situation, high chaos. And it's like, the question is this, and I asked Armstrong this. I'm like, okay, where do we place our bets, man? Where do we park our butts? Because where is not going to be in the crumple zone? Where are we going to? Where's the driver's compartment that's going to survive the crash? Right? Because there's going to be great opportunity here, because this is the collapsing of everything is going to generate a host of opportunities for the rebuilding. That's what's going to happen. And so it's like, okay, where do you place your bets? And the United States is a great place. It has a lot of advantages that are going to be come to fruition here, and that's just fortune. And so that's go ahead.
Essentially, the Europeans built their empires, but they were distributed and conflicted. And we built an empire that was not distributed and conflicted. And it was concentrated. And it turned out to be the biggest empire in the world.
Right.
And that's partly because the English that came here, the middle class, were industrial. And you add to that the Germans, right? And we're industrious as hell.
But I would call it a federation that was transformed into an empire last century.
Yeah,
by our enemies.
Right, correct. I'm agreed.
Okay, I'm just clarifying terms for the audience.
Well, I was trying to more make the comparison between this economic organization that America ended up being was larger than the others. The only people that really had a chance were the Russians, but they chose the wrong way to do it, which is what the Russians always do. Low trust people, so they always choose the wrong fucking way. So they went out, so they were aggressors because they're low trust people. And so then they got the communists in there and it was all screwed up. But I mean, we didn't start out that different, but they just went nowhere. And we just kept getting bigger. It's the same thing with under Putin. If he decided to build the economy instead of build a new what do you call it, new set of boyars, their servants, then he would have built, Russia would be economically about the same as Norway. And then there wouldn't be any debate here. Right, but he didn't. So I don't know. I just look at the world and say, how do you, what do you say? What's predictive? Well, I mean,
well, the question is this: is to each of us individually and in the aggregate is, where will you like your bet to be placed? Because there's no not betting. There's just like the problem is that there's no investment anymore. All of it is seemingly speculative.
you know what Scott
The
Adams does?
predictability.
I'm going to run with this. Okay, you're going to put the idea in my head. I'll run with it.
Okay, so it's the issue is that the predictability is so low in this chaotic environment that there is no investment. There is mere speculative potentials that can be bet upon. And so you place your bets as best you can on these speculative ventures, and they are speculative because you can't see what's really happening. And that's very unfortunate, but it is, you're left with what you have. What tools are at your disposal to navigate these choppy waters?
Now that's, I understand. What should I do to be safe for me? And then there's those of us who will say, I don't matter. I just have to make sure it's safe for everyone. And I'm in that world. So I want to know, I want to still try to do what's safe for everyone if I can.
Well, there's good groups that are gathering that are designed to be agreeable in that cooperative sense, to have conversations that are of a nature that is not self-oriented, but conversations between the silos of meaning and not of competitive nature.
Right.
And I'm picking up increasing sense of that energetic.
Yeah, I don't know what's accelerating it, but it's happening. Might have been a little bit of Trump. I don't know.
Joe Rogan.
What did Joe say?
He's been like this for a long time. He sees himself as he's just trying to communicate. So he's trying to make sure the channels are open between the silos and that we're making sense. We're just trying to make sense between the silos. And that's the right answer to this quiz.
Very,
as opposed to angry yelling and fighting.
It's very difficult to see how Europe survives without being turned into the Middle East. And it's here too, because you just can't incorporate those people at that level. You just can't.
Well, we'll see what they choose to do. This reminds me of that Kalergi plan.
The Romans chose to go away. They chose.
They went to Switzerland, right?
Well, they failed. So are we going to fail too?
That remains to be seen. I don't think so.
Well, I hope there's enough reserve of real men left to stop it, but I don't know. I mean, it's really the immigration problem is the problem. And so let me go down this basic narrative, if you'll let me. So Elon fired 75% of the Twitter staff and it made no difference. Do you know how many companies I've acquired and I could have done that too?
What do you mean it made no difference?
Twitter's a better off company with 75% of the people gone.
Okay.
Because the engineer's the only ones doing any work.
Right.
What were those people doing?
Nothing good.
Right. Well, but who somebody thought it was doing something good.
They were expending resources and they thought it was good that they could go there and have a wine bar.
So I told you the story of I don't know if it's Buffett or who else. Can't remember who said it, bought the railroad car company. I tell the story often. And it turns out that there's a 7-story building in New York, and it's costing 50 million a year or whatever. And it turns out that nobody in that whole building actually does anything useful. So we just fired them all, and it didn't make any difference.
And sold the building.
Right. So when I look at my companies, right, I make sure everybody's billable except accounting and IT infrastructure, like the guys who manage them. Everybody else is billable, including me.
Right.
If you're stupid enough to hire me,
it's going to cost you.
So anyway, so that's how you get out of that problem. But a lot of companies are organized as departments instead of projects.
Okay.
Right. And so because they're organized as departments, they tend to any scope of work takes a whole person, and work expands to fill available time. So honestly. So we went through this problem in the 80s, and we're probably going to go through it again, which is in the 80s. I think I've told the story about how we finally had experimented with the socialist method of organizing due to Boston Consulting's incorporation of that into the management consultancy business in the 20s or 30s. I think it was the 30s. Mm-hmm. And so in the 80s, we discovered that all those people were dead weight, mostly because we learned from the Japanese how it should be done, right? Which is small mobile teams. And so they fired all these people, and that's where the franchise industry comes from, which is what I built in the 80s, right? The franchise. So the franchise industry comes from is all those people who had formerly high-paying jobs in corporate America who were kicked out because they actually didn't do anything. So I'm seeing the same thing happen now, and the
overly credentialed group is going to lose their shirt.
Well, it's that there's too many people who don't do anything.
I think we just said the same thing, because it's like the work expend. I swear to God, I'm dealing with the faxes coming into the office, and I had this chat with my business associate on Friday. I go in there and go, hey, we get a little folder every day, right? It's like I said, yo, is the folder getting increasingly difficult to process for you? Because I'm thinking that it's getting harder to get rid of the piece of paper that was faxed to me by the pharmacist or whoever it was. Because so the difficulty level's ramping up, and it has no basis in anything real. It's like some bureaucrat somewhere is justifying their life by sending me a fax that's trying to get me to do something, and it's nearly incomprehensible. So it's like, we'll get rid of their credentialed butts, and so what's going to come is this great redistribution of the wealth of the civilization. It's coming like a freight train, right? There's going to be a redistribution from non-productive to productive.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's going to be a redistribution. It's just going to be like we did in the 80s. Is there's going to be a purge of people who are unnecessary, because I don't want to name any.
Right.
What company can I name safely?
Acme.
Well, certainly Facebook. Right. I mean, but there are a lot of companies that you go into and you're like, I want to do a lot of business process analysis in what we do, right? I mean, how does information move through me? That's sort of what I originally got reputation for was diagramming what actually happened in a business, right?
Right.
So you diagram that out and you realize, shit, all these people are useless. It's like my friend Chris. He replaced a floor of 70 some odd people with one small, simple desktop computer program.
Oh my.
Right. And the woman who, of course, the woman who was in charge hated it, because now she's got one employee and she's actually unnecessary. He can do the job. Right. And so I think we're going to go through that phase again. And except that it's going to be the people who write things rather than record things. Does that make sense? The people who write and compile things rather than record things. So at that point, when you're in that old day, you are generally doing a lot of data entry at the time. and doing simple calculations on data entry. And that's the banking industry at the time, right?
Right.
And then you perform some basic analysis on it, and etc. And then all of a sudden, you're like, well, all 70 of you do something very simple, and I can write a program that does the work,
process the information, yeah.
Process the information, and everybody goes away, right? So you get the whole floor. I mean, it's a whole floor in the banking industry,
right?
So so that kind of thing it's pretty endemic.
Well, it's like I'm thinking about the academies now, which is it's over administrative overburden everywhere.
Your business, the academies, and government's the same. It's that if you're not actually a provider, right? That's the trick. The providers need to have some way have management authority, right? Because they're the only ones who actually know anything. The rest of it's just finance. If it were me, I would just hire a bunch of finance guys to keep track of the data and get all the providers in. You know what'll happen is providers will appoint other providers to make decisions, because it's like what I would do, right? I'm like, Jim, you're going to make the same fucking decision I would, right? There's no, and you like it, and I think it's boring, so I just I proxy you my vote. Well, that would happen, right? And you can just proxy your votes, and then you'd have hospitals and even everything like motor vehicle departments. You'd have providers making the answer. The problem is what happens is the people don't want to deal with a customer, and so they move into the management team, right? So they don't have to deal with the customer, and they get the worst. And this wage goes down, so you get a lower quality person being the provider.
Right. They keep on squeezing the low end, and it's like they don't squeeze on us too much because they need us, but the helpers that help us, the medical assistants, get squeezed, and it's like just minor indignities just increase all the time, and it's like, and it comes down to poor customer service, because the admin has great lip service to customer service, and they annoy the people who provide the customer service enough to make it so they don't stick around.
Yeah.
And so
you made this point in the past that every study says that it costs more to try to save these nickels than happen during scams, right? So we used to complain about Medicare theft, but the cost of trying to prevent Medicare theft is far higher than the Medicare theft. Whereas if we did it the other way around, is you got a bounty for reporting someone, it turned into a for-profit industry.
I just go like this. It's just the people that are controlling the man behind the curtain. Those people they're like blind fools, and they are just driving to destruction. They can't help.
But let's take about it. Okay, so back in the 2007, 2008, I had an assistant that went to work for one of the big banks up in Canada, right? She calls me up and says, Curt, these people actually don't know what they're doing. They have a window into their work that's this big. And so they get a piece of paper in, they evaluate it, but they don't understand what's happening as that debt's being rolled up in New York somewhere into a package. And what's happened, they only see, I did this loan met this criteria, right? It's at this risk and mortgage rate, whatever my approval. That's great. But you're fucking blind to the context you're operating in. Well, I mean, a lot of people in your industry, right? Your medical industry, they're the same. And it's it's like, I just view that as the central issue, is that why is it that people don't know the process, the business process that they're involved in? And it's because if we make them know it, we can hold them liable for it. But we can't hold them liable for it if they don't know it. So I've always said that the problem is if you touch an instrument, right, that affects a monetary instrument, anybody, affects someone's billing or whatever, you're responsible. You're as responsible as every other person in the chain. So it doesn't get to, well, my manager told me. It doesn't matter if your manager told you. If your manager told you one of two things needs to happen. You need the manager to explain to you how this doesn't violate basically reciprocity by the law, or
Yep.
or you need to tell your manager that you can't do this because you're now criminally liable too. And if we made
Right.
everybody in the chain criminally liable, people would be taught, they'd be insured,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Right. And this would happen. And that's what, and instead, what do? We put some moron as a cop above them whose major interest is to make work expand to fill all available time.
Until I retire. So that's it. That's it. I have great confidence it's going to turn out okay, but it may get a little bit messy.
I don't have that
Like
kind
there's retribution cycles involved here, which
Yeah.
is the failure of the system to have reciprocity generates. Hello.
No, I'm taking notes.
The failure of the system to have reciprocity at its base generates potentials for reciprocity when the people are mad about the way they're handled by a flawed system. And so there's procedures have been followed that are not lack reciprocity. They've been dutifully followed by people that are following orders, and it's like, okay, you did it, you did something, and there may be hell to pay.
Yes.
And that's okay too. It's just everything in its own time.
You just run into this problem all the time. Like I used to teach the money. I tell the story a lot. I used to teach the money class, and it was required for everybody who joined the company. Right, first 2 weeks, every 2 weeks, or 3 weeks, I can't remember. We hold the indoctrination session.
I like it.
And I spend 3 or 4 hours going over how the business makes money and how the cash flow works for the business. Right. And so the people don't have the opportunity to believe stupid things. My attitude is I can't figure out how you get out of high school and not know what I teach.
Right.
I taught basically the history of the evolution of money in accounting, right? What it allowed people to do with the social. Then I get into, okay, so that's the historical part. Then I work people through our business model, and I say, then I say, here's how the business models the world. Here's what your gas station you make. Here's what your supermarket make. And on the other hand, here's what Microsoft and Apple make, right? These are the high profit margins per employee, right? I draw the thing out, and so where do you think, and I would just list off companies. Where do you think they are? Of course, they're all way down here in the 7, 8, 10, 12% range, right? I mean, in my business, if you get to 14%, you're pretty good, right? I mean, that's a lot of return.
Right.
But then you got to subtract that the rate of inflation. So if the rate of inflation is 6, my 14% is now 11%.
Right.
Now, if you say, okay, well, if I take away the interest costs on my 11%, now what have I got? You guys are fucking expensive, right? I mean, the biggest problem in my business is I got to float people who make $100 and some odd $1,000 a year, thousands of them, right, over the time it takes for somebody to pay the bills. All right, so if you got a 30 to 60 day window. Of course, most of my customers are big Fortune X companies. They pay, if and we give them like a percent if they, or 0.5% if they pay in 30 days, right? So most of them pay, but for a lot of companies, your customers pay you 30, 60, 90, 120 days out. Well, what's the carrying cost of all your salaries and all the taxes and all the other shit on it for 120 days? It's a lot of goddamn money. So you bring that down, you start showing them. So this is what they mean by gross income. This is by EBIT earnings for. So this is what it means when you take the government's fudging of our profitability off, which is what amortization and depreciation are. Takes off that stuff, and then you go down to that, and it's like, okay, now what's our administrative costs versus our delivery cost, and then of that, what are your benefits and taxes? And they're like, how the fuck do we stay in business? And I'm like, exactly.
Hi, now you're on the team.
Now you're on a team. So then you tell them, like, look, if you bill 40 hours this week, that's the most you can bill, right? It's unethical to go over that, right? unless the customer says, I really need you here, then you just pay it. And when people are making, billing $150 an hour, I mean, it turns out to be real money, right? So,
Right.
but in general, that's gonna say now, if you go back and say, now this week you only work 30, right? 30 billable hours, right? But where do I get that 10 hours back now? Never. I
Right.
can't ever make it up. And so the way we look at you is, what's your total billable over the year, right? Which is not going to be 40 hours a week times 52 weeks a year. It's
Right.
around 2,000 hours, right? Or
Right.
maybe and you say, okay, well, other than that, now I got to pay your taxes, your insurance, your overhead, your computer costs, your holidays, your vacations, your sick days, I mean, and I'm done with this. So no. So the real problem is in our business is just carry. I mean, we make plenty of money, but you never have any. Why? Because if you run your business at this size, it's fine. But if you're doubling your business every year or two, which is what I do, right? You're like never have any money. You never have any. You literally don't. You have assets, like you have receivables, many
Right.
millions of dollars, but do you
Yes.
have any in your hand? No, you need a credit line, and
Right.
then it costs you interest on the credit line.
Right.
Right. So it's just, it's just it, so the thing is, so the other thing is, what I do is I'm willing to run a company at 10% instead of 14 or 15% in order to double. Why? Because that's why I sell them.
Right.
Right. I'm just trying to get to 100 million so I can sell it. Right? If I get 100 million, somebody's going to buy the company, right? Because that's just how the world works, right?
Somebody was going to want that thing,
Well,
man.
it's because you got to think of it from a bigger company's perspective. They got all this cash, and how expensive it is to acquire a customer. But if I can buy your $100 million company, I just added $100 million and all the customers you have.
That's it.
And so I've just bought this line. So for them, it's like just a better deal. It's like for me, I go buy $20 million, $12 million, $5 million, even $2 million companies. Why? Because I can't grow the business.
Right.
It's cheaper to acquire a company than it is to acquire the customers the company has. Sorry if I'm making my point here. The thing is, you have to tell people how your business works, right? And then if you imagine you're in the banking sector, these people have no freaking idea how the thing works.
Right.
Or that it's largely a scam.
I like that. That's sottovoce.
And imagine if the law said that if a person answers the phone, they have to be able to solve your problem.
Honestly.
That would solve a lot of things. The other thing is the customer service reps would get paid 80 grand, 80 or 100 grand a year. Right. And they wouldn't be talked down to short phone calls. Why? Because, or what would happen if your company sends out a bill with an overcharge, an illegal charge on it? Well, that's one thing, but what if it's 1,000 times whatever the legal or 100 times whatever the charges? You won't get goofy bills from your hospital or your insurance company anymore because they can't afford the mistake, right? Well, and back in the day,
just such arbitrary nonsense, man.
What do you mean?
Just these systemic errors that cause problems that are. It is, and what's amazing to me is just the amount of fiction that is inside everybody's head about what's really going on in the circumstances. Like, what's the nature of the transaction you're engaged in, and what is everybody's real incentives? And there's just this huge fiction, and it's like that's not. Everybody will say something like this. That's not right. That's not the way it's supposed to be. And I'm like, of course, this is not an idealistic system at all. It's not functioning that way.
Well, back in the day, when computers first came out, people would send bills for $15 or $30 to like 10,000 people. And it was, if they got 1% hit,
they're doing all right.
Or they would get for a non-existent thing, because some people just pay the bill as they come in. and make money on it. So, I mean, you have all sorts of scams, but my favorite one, of course, the worst people in the world at this are cell phone companies and cable companies, because they're like bait into hazard, then do punishment fees.
Yes.
I mean, and then it's just fucking evil. It's just fucking evil. So, I mean, in Europe, they regulate it. I'd rather set up the court system to regulate it.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't, there's the only overhead is the court system when it prosecutes a case. But if I know I'm going to end up in court for screwing something up, I'm not going to do it.
Right.
It's too
I don't have
expensive.
time for this. Yeah. Yeah.
So you just get people being lazy.
That's very good.
Did we do okay today?
I think so. I think so.
I had fun talking about a couple of things there. Anyway, you got anything else?
No, I'm very interested because so when I'm studying the news cycle, just to reiterate, I use the model that I generated when I was watching you interview the middle school teacher administrator, which is
that really affected you. That's really odd how much that affected you.
Well, it's just a study. It's just seeing I'm like watching the bot at work, man. Because you were plugging in information and then you're gathering information. I'm like, I understand what he's doing. You're gathering information about the socio-economic position of that individual, and information about the trifunctional influences that are holding him in that position. And then you recorded it, and I know you put it on your computer somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like this, the same thing as when I'm watching populations of people that are being influenced by external forces for the purpose of holding them in a static position for control purposes.
Mm-hmm.
That was interesting to me, because it's like there's like a group that's being held in stasis, and they're being driven, and the word is, that's our democracy. And those guys are, as opposed to the free agents that are operating outside that sphere, which is we're transmitting information freely at a higher energetic level, and they're kind of frozen in space and time in their psychosocial position, because the influences that I call it sensors that are being imposing upon them to dampen out any energy coming into the system that is unwanted. Mm-hmm. So it's inhibitory functions.
Correct. It's inhibitory. That's its goal, right? Is to inhibit.
So it's like the realization I came to today was this it's all, the social system functions much like the nervous system or the brain.
Yes.
In aggregation and communication pathways, and mostly inhibitory in their function.
Mm. That's disturbing, isn't it? Mostly inhibitory. This is what I always say, lies are really cheap, or falsehoods are cheap, but the primary purpose of falsehoods is actually inhibiting the truth. Right?
It's just crowding it out, right?
Yes.
Noise.
Yes. So it's exasperating, really, and you realize but that's just economics, right? You can defeat somebody by high production of low quality goods, right? You could saturate a market with low quality goods and therefore prevent something else from getting in the market. And one of the proposals we put in the Constitution is the right to repair. Now we want the right to repair because it'll drive all low quality goods out of the market. It'll let only low cost, high quality goods into the market. So the average price of goods might increase, but the price per use, in other words, the usability of a thing, will last, because the amount of stuff we buy that breaks in 3 weeks is
great. It is. It's like the damnation of the last half of the 20th century.
Right. And so, I mean, you think people talk about this, but I'm like, there isn't always a benefit to cheaper goods. There's a benefit to fewer, better goods. One of the things I teach you in that in the book The Millionaire's Mind, which is a great book still, is that they tend to buy things that are very few things. They tend to buy things as if they're heirlooms. So you won't buy a lot of stuff for temporary satisfaction. You save up your money to buy something good for long-term satisfaction. So, it's like I bought my $10,000 couch or whatever it was. It was fucking fancy leather thing, right? You buy this it's a heirloom. And things last for generations, right?
Yes.
Or I bought my 19th century antique library cabinets, right? On the other hand, once in a while, because of the way Indonesia has got wood, they've produced some furniture that is disproportionately, because they have very low labor costs, right? They'll put out some furniture that is, should cost you $15,000 if it's made in England, right? Or $20,000. But it's made over there, it costs you $2,000. Well, how can you tell the difference? Absolutely, right? There's no comparison, but it's still better than the $1,000 equivalents that you'll buy in mass market stores. So, it's that whole idea of, if you stop the crap, right, you can extend people's time preference. Right? And it does, it's some things like, if you want to buy a piece of junk for $99, we shouldn't finance it. Right. But if you want to buy that thing in legacy form or an heirloom form that's going to last till your kids get it, now we can finance it. That makes sense, because the time. So there's a whole bunch of things that we just do that are dumb, that are built. This is what I was trying to get to, is that we've built it too much hyper consumption, right? And we're paying the price of it because it's just not possible to maintain it.
Right.
Possible. All right. Have I got us through? I got us through an hour and a half. Usually we go 2 hours.
I know.
You were easy today.
Sorry, I hate to disappoint you.
If I ask the women in your life, they're going to tell me you're easy too.
I probably. That's disappointing. I'm not saying they're wrong either. It's just how it is. So
most women think most men are easy. I remember Amanda's like, men are stupid. I can have any men I want. I just walk in, ask them. Right.
But this is an interesting function that the manosphere was teaching me today, because I'm talking to the man. Man is like this. He goes, their women are constantly testing you, and they think you're stupid if you are among these things. Okay, they're going to tell you 3 kinds of lies, and he goes, here's the 3 kinds of lies, and if you agree to any of them, they're going to categorize you as stupid, and they won't feel bad when they walk away from you, walk over you, or do whatever they do. And it's like, okay, don't be stupid. And so it's like it's like the key function, which is the polarity change that is occurring here, is at the end of as the liberal settlement, post-war liberal settlement dies out, is that the general conception is the woman is the prize. And it's like, no, the man is the prize. That's what's coming.
I know.
We're not having it. We're not having your silly lies, and we're not pandering to you, or indulging your
Actually, if they're giving the sex away so easy, if you don't have to work for it, what? And if you can rent it, don't buy it. Because and as long as the marriage and divorce laws are what they are, it's stupid to get married. It's just stupid. I'm dumb enough to do it again, but it's stupid. I've done it 3 times.
I gotta.
I could just keep adding, and
God, my uncle's like, he had 4 wives, and I'm like, God damn, you're a slow learner.
My problem is I love women. It's a really high price, but in my view, it's worth it. So
there you go. And in the market, that's what counts. It's a subjective marketplace, right?
Yeah, I'm not quite the catch I was when I was 10 years younger, but or 20 years younger.
Yeah.
Being a successful man in your 40s and 50s
Mm.
is really fucking awesome. It is just absolutely awesome. Until you get really sick or something, but it was really awesome. I prefer being an intellectual, honestly, but it was really awesome because people just, everything works. You want people to make you happy. They want your business. They want your attention. They want your time.
Right.
Oh, anyway, so I mean, I don't think the same for women. I mean, the thing about being a guy, what I like about being my age is
Yeah.
I'm hyper gregarious, as you know, and have made fun of me about
It's
it.
stunning.
Now you've seen it in person.
It's really stunning. Wow, that's a breath of fresh air.
That's one way to look at it. It's because either socially fearless or socially addicted or one or the other. I don't know which.
I don't have a category for this.
So it's called in psychology called a politician's personality. You have to. It's actually called natural politician. It's people who are naturally gregarious. It's natural politician. So this was my father. My father and my grandfather were fabulous. My father on my father's side and my grandfather and my great grandfather on my mother's side were just absolutely amazing. If my dad had done nothing else, if he had just gone with being a politician, it would have been the best thing in the world for him because he's fabulous at it. He was also utterly, totally incorruptible. Absolutely. And make him furious. I saw him threaten to beat a guy with a 2x4. Don't question my dad. That's the one thing I love about him, right?
Oh.
It's like, it was absolutely dead, straight, honest, hardworking, whatever. But if he'd been a politician, it'd be fine because this was in his nature. So anyway, I forgot what I was going to say. So you've seen the gregarious.
Hyper gregarious.
Yeah, but there's a reason I was going to tell you. I forgot it now. So it's just interesting to be gregarious because you're basically running experiments on everybody all the time. It's just fucking fascinating.
That's right.
And it turns out that, if you're openly gregarious people, most people are fun.
Yes.
Right?
They want to be friendly and
they want to be friendly, right?
Right. So what is it? It's an icebreaker because it overcomes their natural inhibitions to being gregarious.
Right. And so almost everybody will respond. I mean, the ones that don't are like the women who've been around too many bad men. There's one woman up here at my favorite restaurant now. Or no, not a restaurant. What do you call it?
Diner.
A pizza place, right?
Okay.
She's like, I'm like, I can't talk to her because her reaction is like, you men. I'm like, fuck you, I never did anything except be nice to you, right? Right. And everybody else in the place. I mean, I have a charming relationship with everybody else in the place, right? So, you can't fix those people. They're broken in their souls, right?
Yes,
I mean,
yes.
for most people. And then they're very timid. Like I have a neighbor 2 doors over. It's a little bit of a thing, 4'11" maybe, right? Got her little fuzzy dog that keeps in her purse, right? Very quiet. Goes to church like 3 times a week. Absolutely cute, right? Adorable, sweet lady. But it's just terrifying to her. So I have to.
I can understand that.
Terrifying to her. So, but in any event, I was going to go somewhere with it and I forgot. So apologies. Can't make something.
All right.
All right.
Did you enjoy the day?
I enjoyed it. I just want to get together again because I had so much fun when we got together last time. And I know Brandon did too. And
yeah, it was a great time.
Blast. We got to get some more guys together and do that. And I don't know if there was a big flurry about organizing some roadshow, and I don't know if that's dissipated or not, but I hope it doesn't dissipate because I want that to happen.
I'll make some more noises. All right, I'll make noises and see what we can stir up.
Just get us. We need to have at least one. Having one will build confidence in the team,
right?
So that we can have.
So I got some guys they're in Texas and Arkansas and Oklahoma in that neighborhood, and I'm like, okay, that's close enough together that we can aggregate. And so I'm encouraging them, and then I'm like encouraging another group to gather a list of college clubs that are nationwide that might invite us to talk to them. That's guaranteed controversy.
I like controversy.
Yeah, I know. That's all good. So I'm like, that's the plan in my mind for that job.
Right. Well, I think that there are probably 5 or 6 places around the country that we have enough people that we could fill a room with.
Mm-hmm.
And it depends on who we invite. If you invite more people, like other speakers, you get more.
That's right.
So.
And I was also looking at finding, trying to make links to other intellectual types. Specifically, I mentioned Catherine Austin Fitz, because I think it would be very interesting to have her in a panel discussion. Because what's going on and how are we going to get out of this mess, right?
Mm-hmm.
She's sharp and she's like we are. It's like figuring out how the world is going to reassemble itself after this crash-a-roni.
We did to crash E. Michael Jones.
I would like to talk to him too, because he's good.
I can't. How can you? I mean, I just want to. I want to have his mind, right? I mean, I can't mount his brain in mind, and I can't.
Mm-hmm.
And I know if I could just talk to him, I could grasp how he views it and find a way to cross that bridge.
Right. So you'd understand his position, right?
Yes. You saw me how I work, right? You've seen
Yeah.
how I work right now. That's what I would do.
Yeah.
I just ask a lot of questions.
No, and it's like people like that will appreciate the questions because he wants people to understand him.
Right. And I think that would be really useful. And I'm not. I mean, most of the people that try to interview him, frankly, aren't that sophisticated, right? And so they can't really get at what he's trying to say. And so I would love to do that Charlie Rose fashion. Just tape an interview with him where I can have, we both be gentlemen sitting there. I'd have to sit in a booster seat though, because he's kind of
You're a nut, man. Oh boy.
Because I bet I could make him understandable. It might take me a bit. I mean, it might take 45 minutes, but I bet I could make.
Oh yeah, I think so.
Understandable.
I do like the Charlie Rose system. It's like a English gentleman's club room,
Right.
just very.
All it is a table with black curtains around it and a couple of what they use 2 or 3 cameras. I think they use 3 cameras, right? They use the wide shot and then the 2.
Mm-hmm.
So they use 3 cameras, and it's like really just talk about it. And God, it was so easy to do this in Ukraine because in Lviv,
Yeah.
we had a studio that was. I mean, we'd pay them. I don't know to do a thing like that was probably $500. They give you the finished damn tape for $500. You know what it costs in the States to have that? Like 12 or 15 grand.
Oh my.
Right. And I was like, they give you the tape in like 3 days. So, I mean, only because they just didn't want to rush because that's Ukraine. Right? But I love those guys. You can see quite a few of my interviews, TV interviews in Ukraine took place there.
Yeah. Yeah, I saw them.
You saw them? Yeah.
I've seen them.
So, anyway, so I'd like to talk to E. Michael Jones. I probably would like to talk to academic agent about his newest videos. I'm going to talk to Rudyard on his show. So,
Yes.
I can't imagine James will talk to me yet, but
No, it's maybe still too cold, right?
Yeah.
Which is okay. It's everything. Funnel is doing its job. It's just going to take everybody their own time to get there. Unavoidable. It's those who wish to seek a correspondence with the universe will end up there. There's no, because every other place is non-correspondent. And it's like, okay, that we all end up in the same place if we're seeking correspondence.
So do you, just in our last few minutes here, like I was noticing earlier, how sophisticated your worldview is now compared to when I first met you 2 years ago.
Okay.
You were really well read 2 years ago.
I read a lot of books and I was trying to catch up.
You were very well read. But your ability to look at the world and make judgments about it, right? Are you aware of that difference in yourself?
That's an interesting question. It's like it's difficult for the fish to be aware of the water.
Yeah, exactly. So this is why I'm asking this question, because a lot of the guys are saying the same thing.
But it is there. It was an intentional evolutionary process that I put myself through, and so yes, I'm aware of it. But it's hard to quantify.
It's very hard to remember what you used to think like. Right, unless it's
I tell you what I was thinking like, because it's like, look, I got the story goes like this. We bought the practice, and then we falsely believed there was a real market in medicine until we proved there wasn't by beating our heads against the wall enough until the handwriting on the wall was evident. It's like, that's my blood. No, that's not good. There's a door right over here. It's like that. So that's when I started doing this, and I'm like, I'm just doing my penance. I'm working, paying my debts to society, and I'm trying to learn. So I'm reading like crazy because I'm like, I'm so far behind on what I know. I need to gather more information because I don't know what's going on here. Clearly, I'm ignorant of something, and I better figure it out. And so I'm working my ass off to get there. Just like I say, I studied for about 5 years reading before I started talking to you. Because I'm like, I'm just trying to catch up to where I should be in terms of basic understanding of history and circumstance. And then to put the science on top of that, that allows me to now I can see into realms of human behavior that I was unable to see before.
Mm-hmm.
So like when I say that I go back to this conversation we had with the middle school teacher administrator, because it was illustrative of that process, which is now I understand exactly what's going on. You're finding specific information that tells you about the trifunctional tethers that are holding him in the position that he has chosen. Mm-hmm. And it's easy to see. And it was easy for me to see you doing it. And it was, but I couldn't nowhere near have done anything like that 2 years ago. Mm-hmm. Because I would have just thought we were just having, I would have thought it was just a conversation and we were speaking English and stuff.
Fascinating. Well, I'm just on this thread now is that I used to be amazed that people could learn in the first place.
Right.
You know, when I first started, especially Martin was the one that really threw me because he was so fast. Everybody else would get something right and something wrong, right? You know, but now, you know, you look at the field of guys we've got and it's pretty impressive. But if you look, I can remember what they used to think like, because I used to try to get the in my head. And I'm like, the difference between these guys is past and present is phenomenal. And I think none of us really are aware of how advanced we are now compared to the rest of the world.
We don't have a good measurement system.
Right. Because you can ask, I mean, especially if you take our team, you, me, Luke, Brandon, Martin, Jacob's quiet, but if he'll at least write it, You know, who else can I include in there? Well, I'll just avoid any name. I'll protect the innocent without, so I don't name more names. But if you ask those people to explain something in history, some human behavior in history, they're going to come up with about the same answer. You know, and it's just funny. I'll come up with the benevolent version. Martin will come up with a non-benevolent version. Luke will explain it as our failings as a society to give people the foundations. I think Jacob will be the most neutral. He'll be more like me, right? And then Brandon will tell you the political consequences and why we have to, what we have to do to get there. And you know, and you and I will, if we're talking about it, we'll be basically find humor in it somewhere, right? I mean,
Right.
all right, so it's just funny, but everybody's going to basically say the same thing by using the same method. So, you know, we need, like, you know, what Martin says, we probably have, you know, 500 people that are sort of in the hopper.
Right.
But one thing I've noticed is that you need quite a bit of life experience to understand. And I see that. You get someone like Jacob, you're like, how did the hell did you get there? Right? I mean, he's what, 21 or 22 years old?
Okay.
It's like, what a faltist, you know.
Yeah.
How the hell did he get there at 21? Well, the answer is he did all the work when he was 16. Right. So the thing is, he did all the work by study. But if you haven't got the study, you need life experience.
Right.
And so there's so many people that don't have the study and don't have the life experience. So it's just hard to find people. Whereas, you know, if you get guys that have seen enough of life, and you certainly have, right? And they've read enough books, it's like, wait a minute, this makes a lot of damn sense. Let me follow this for a bit. And they begin to see it. And then we get, you know, people like Jacob and Martin, who are just savants about it from day one. You wouldn't think Martin would get there either, because I mean, he used to be a pretty left-wing guy, right? I mean,
Unbelievable.
that's what he was, but the rate he got it was unbelievable to me. The rate he learns.
I think the natural curiosity to acquire information is what it's necessary, and that one is its own rate limiting function.
Yeah. Anyway, all right. So it's we're coming about 2 hours, so we're coming to the end of our discourse here.
That's it. So it is like the money class for the organization that we're doing here is the interesting class. What's the money class look like for onboarding to this science? Right?
That is a really smart question.
I keep them in the reserve.
You do?
A little bit.
I wrote in the fall of 2017 the outline for the courses.
Right.
And they're still right. The thing is, I used to think back then it was taking me a lot of pages to make an idea. Today it doesn't. So I think that those courses can be condensed. What you're saying is, can we provide a summary of the course in 3 or 4 hours? I think we can.
See, that would be worthy, and then that would be worthy of a road trip to do it.
Boy, you just gave me a mission.
I'm trying not to distract you from getting your book done.
Oh, that'll help you get the book done.
Right? Okay, there you go. See,
this afternoon, I'm going to work on integrating this sex differences thing into man, which I've been like screwing around in my head for days now. So I'll try to get that in there. But yeah.
Perfect. Now we've hit a level of accomplishment that is worthy of our time.
I want to stick with that though. That's a mission. Can I make a 3 or 4 hour presentation that summarizes all the work? I think I can.
I think that's doable.
I'm sure I can. I can probably do it off the top of my head.
Right. Very good.
Yep.
All right, Curt.
Love you, brother.
Thank you for the minutes.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.